Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to tonight's special meeting of the Board of Education. I'd like the record to show, please, that Dr. Heidi Gold-Dworkin is traveling out of the country, and we will be attempting to connect with her via electronic means after public comment. So tonight's meeting is dedicated to the redistricting plan the board has been considering since early February. To reiterate to the board what has brought us to this point in time. Last March 24th, after more than a year of work, our long-range planning committee made recommendations to the board relating to the direction and look of the school system going forward. So that's almost a year to the day. The board spent the next several months reviewing the recommendations and last fall adopted the following. We directed administration to proceed with the reconfiguration of the elementary schools to kindergarten through grade 5, effective with the 2015-16 school year in all 8 elementary schools. We directed administration to decentralize the current pre-K classes to a minimum of 3 schools effective with the 2015-16 school year. Our conversation, as well as that of the Long-Range Planning Committee, centered on geographic location, and we agreed to allow administration to determine the best placement for those classrooms. We directed administration to take the necessary steps to redistrict the elementary school population in order to balance school enrollment. And finally, we directed administration to begin to explore and develop college and career pathway programming for the grades 6 through 12 continuum and to begin exploring and enhanced programming for grades K through 5. These motions passed unanimously or nearly so in the case of one, and as such, we support them as a collective board, our one-voice policy. We do not have to agree with what we vote against, but once the majority decision is made, we support the decision as a board. We adopted the 5 points I just mentioned. Further, because of the complexity of citywide redistricting, we retain the services of our long-range planning consultant to help with redrawing the school lines. We had much discussion about that process over the course of our summer workshops and during the October 13th meeting when we approved this. The point we now find ourselves at is the culminating piece of the infrastructure work we adopted last fall. This redistricting effort does not and cannot happen in a vacuum. It is part of a bigger picture, namely the plans we put in place last fall. So fundamental to the role of a Board of Education member is that we represent the entire school district. The prevailing words throughout our governance processes are all students. We have today some 2,600 elementary students. As a board, we develop policies that provide direction, but we delegate authority for the operation of our schools to the superintendent, our educational leader. As board members, we govern with outward vision rather than internal preoccupation. We govern with a clear distinction between board and superintendent roles and with collective decisions. We govern with future orientation rather than past or present, and we govern with proactivity rather than reactivity. This is our governance policy 2. It has been a long road to get to this point tonight. We have gone over a tremendous amount of information. I'm confident we've been given all the information that we need to make this decision. So that said, is there anything Board of Education members need clarification on before we move into any formal motions? Ms. Federico?
Madam Chair, I'd like to ask administration if they could address the questions that have been raised about the after-school child care programs, that the discrepancy in the costs between the schools. Thank you.
Yes, we can address that, and I'm going to ask Mr. Riccitelli to give the details.
Thank you, Dr. Fieser, members of the board. Yes, you've asked us to look at specifically 2 areas that have been identified by the public, one being those students who are currently being provided with transportation to the Boys and Girls Club from JFK and Pumpkin Delight, and secondly, to look at the difference in cost between those students who are in the Milford Public Schools before and after care program, which is at Pumpkin Delight and JFK, as compared to the other 6 schools which are operated by the YMCA. And so we've done that. I would preface this by saying that we continue to work on it, but I can give you the preliminary pieces that we have in place and what I can tell you we definitely can do, and the things that we'll be looking at as the weeks and months go on. First, let's address Boys and Girls Club. And we'll just go back and do a little bit of history. Boys and Girls Club has been in existence for about 5 years now, which came in around the same time of the reconfiguration and the closing of Simon Lake School. As you know, Boys and Girls Club is, the actual location of Boys and Girls Club is within the Pumpkin Delight School District. And so the first year, the only students who were provided transportation were those students who went to Pumpkin Delight School and were on the Pumpkin Delight bus that went to that neighborhood. And if there was, and what we did was we made an exception so that the students who would normally be dropped off at their home were dropped off at dropped off at Boys and Girls Club instead. The same way that we provide transportation.
Mr. Riccitelli, I need to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I messed up. We need to do public comment first.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to take a step back. I'm sorry, my apologies. So we're going to ask you that same question after we're done with public comment. But
Absolutely.
Public comment is the next item on the agenda, and we do need to do that first.
Sure.
So, public comment. My apologies, everybody. So we're going to move on to public comment. We appreciate the public's desire to express their opinions to the board this evening, and we ask a couple of things. We ask you to speak into the microphone so that everybody can hear you. We ask you to state your name and address so that we can have that for the record. And we ask the audience that you be respectful of all the speakers that wish to address us tonight at this meeting so that we can all hear what everybody is saying. So with that, speakers may offer objective comments about school operations and programs. The board encourages speakers not to express personal complaints or defamatory comments about the Milford Board of Education personnel or any person associated with the Milford Public School System. Security issues and matters relating to negotiations or grievances will not be permitted, and consistent with the principles of the Federal Education Right to Privacy Act, discussion of students is prohibited without parental waiver. Speakers are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes. We have a timekeeper. You'll hear 1 bell at 2 minutes, 45 seconds. You'll hear 2 bells when your 3 minutes is up, and at that time we ask that you relinquish the microphone for the next speaker. And public comment is limited to agenda items only tonight, which is the redistricting plan. So with that said, whoever would like to address the board, please step forward.
Hi, Pamela and John Pargan and Jack Pargan, 759 West River Street, Milford. We are asking that you please consider keeping the special needs children that are in the Mathewson School District at Mathewson. My son Jack is going into the newly developed program that the city has offered for a special needs kindergarten. I believe most of Jack's potential classmates live in the Mathewson district. It would be most imperative for these children to have the most continuity in their school environment, with not only their peers, but their teachers, paras, classrooms, and buildings and surroundings as well. Change for these children is very difficult, and we are hoping that this is the start of several great years at Mathewson. We live a half a mile from Mathewson. Our son has a seizure disorder, among other medical issues. To ride a bus for any length of time longer than is necessary is putting him at more risk for a bad situation. Please help all of us to feel as comfortable as we can while leaving our fragile children in the hands of the city. We chose to live in this area of Milford, and we are asking to please not displace us. Any comments? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Katz, and I live at 29 Central Avenue. I'm here to address the board to ask one last time that you really strongly consider grandfathering the current fourth graders who will be moving on next year and who are slated now to be in a school different than their sister school pairing. Again, I know we've heard these arguments before, but it is difficult to ask children who've already been moved multiple times to move on in this last year of elementary school to a new environment, and in some cases with only a very small handful of peers going with them. I also ask that you make this decision this evening along with the other decisions that you make so that everybody's children by tomorrow morning will know where they'll be attending school next year. I also ask that you make a decision that will move Milford schools towards more equity, especially in numbers between all the schools, keeping in mind the most vulnerable students that we have in our district. Please make a decision that we as a district will be able to grow with, and one that will ensure that in the foreseeable future we don't need to make more large changes and more upheaval for our students. Thank you.
Sherry Franzman, 46 Somerset Lane. I want to show you guys a picture of my 8-year-old and her best friend, Ella and Quinn, who under the plan you're proposing will no longer be in school together next year. Quinn's slated to stay at Mathewson while my daughter Ella is slated to be moved to Orange Ave. And while you may think that only 110 children are being pulled out of Mathewson and only 110 children are impacted, you're dead wrong. Because Quinn, while she'll be staying at Mathewson, will be impacted because her best friend will no longer be there. There's plenty of other Quinns that will be left at Mathewson without their friends who you're moving. I want you to remember that these are not numbers on paper. These are children. Our flesh and blood, our precious children. It's not 110 dots on paper. It's Jackson, it's Addie, it's Melita, Mikey, Tyler, Connor, Ava, Matthew, Amanda, Tyson. I don't think I need to go on. Children that are being uprooted from JFK to Mathewson, from Mathewson to Orange Ave, very much in part for the convenience of pre-K parents, for the convenience of what are likely stay-at-home mothers who are driving their children to half-day daycare pre-K programs, and so that they don't have to drive a mile or two further down the road. Ella and Quinn will not be in school together next year so that a stay-at-home mom doesn't have to drive a mile farther down the road. If you guys can go to sleep tonight having made that decision and feel good about that, then God bless you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joanne Poffenberger. I live at 50 Green Street. So I wonder what happened to the vision. I wonder where is the pie in the sky option? So why didn't the board create the perfect scenario? Why didn't we have a scenario that said our district would be perfect if we have a new school on the west side? If we have all these great resources, where is that option where the parents can say, you know what, I want to save money for that. I want to try to work towards that. Where is an option where we can have hope? Instead, I feel that the option that we were presented was the low budget, the cut corners, the let's just make it work option. And that's what's frustrating to me. I know that parents would rally behind an option that makes good sense for Milford, even if it means more time and more money. So here I stand 1 year later. A year ago last year, I asked you not to redistrict last year for this current school year, not to go back to the K-5 because I have a current 5th grader. So in this past year, what really has changed? If we knew that we were going to go back to that, why wasn't the redistricting done then? Why wasn't that presented as this is what's going to happen? I was actually told that if the redistricting was presented, that the vote to return to K-5 schools wouldn't happen. So why wouldn't you present all the information available along the way? The move to go to K-5 schools has been presented all along by the Board of Ed as a return to neighborhood schools. The redistricting option that's been brought forth is not a return to neighborhood schools. I do want to be clear to say that I'm not standing here asking you to change the proposed redistricting lines based on where my daughter will attend school next year. She will, however, move from Meadowside to Calf Pen with only a few people that she knows. We will get through that. If that's the plan that you choose to go with, she will make new friends. She will be fine. So I'm just asking you tonight to please reflect on the one choice that is presented to us and be sure that you're making the right choice for the children of Milford. And if this is the right choice, I ask you to please keep equity throughout the district. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to address the board this evening?
Hello, Cersei Diedelbaum, 501 Burnt Plains Road. I have 4 children, all will be attending Milford schools next year. As I was scrolling through the slides that are online, I came across the redistricting option 4I. If you look at the utilization of K through 5 projections, Orange Avenue School is at 62% K through 5, while other schools are at 88% and 100%. As I go back to the meeting notes that I have taken to report back to the PTA meetings, I noticed that the one most important change that was to be made was to have parity throughout the town of Milford. Running Orange Avenue School at 62% K through 5 is not parity and will still be separated into 2 separate schools. I am very proud of Orange Avenue School and feel that our school community will be shortchanged if this decision is made. Everyone in town is affected by this redistricting. I am for change and was looking forward to the schools going back K through 5, even if it meant my children being separated from close relationships. I was going into this redistricting speaking to my children about all of the new friends they will meet. And now I find myself having to fight to make sure Orange Avenue is equal to the rest of the town, which was my understanding on why we were redistricting in the first place. I ask you to stay true to your word and bring parity throughout the town of Milford, and we'll be looking forward to seeing the programming that will be taking place next year. Thank you.
Good morning, Board. Administration, Jacqueline Smith, 205 Centennial Drive. I know you've had my emails. I don't even know where to begin. It's frustration, it's hope, it's for the future of the kids. That's why we're here. I know change has to happen, but the change that's in front of us, is it the right change? Is it for right now? Have we looked at the lines for the future, for the middle school, the high school levels? My fear is we'll be back here 3 to 5 years with more issues, more change, the same kids getting affected again and again. That's our fear. This is about the kids. It's not about politics. It's not about party lines. Yeah, parity's great. But you know what? My whole thing is if we could just keep these kids where they're comfortable, where they're secure, with their peers, with their friends. Not just the kids at Mathewson's and JFK, but if we just keep them balanced and move some classrooms around. We're not looking to take special ed out of Mathewson. Keep it there. Keep one of the classrooms, the most needed. Put some, it's not parity, it's not over the whole community. You say you want pre-K and special ed together so they can adjust. It's only for the schools, elementary schools, 4 out of the 8. So how's that parity? It's not. Put it in CAF Penn. Put it in the other schools that don't have it. Distribute it equally. And if we did that and make those changes, MAP I could work and would work. And you have the best policy for having families happy, the community happy and balanced. And then when classrooms open up, when you say the decline in enrollment, put the pre-K back into JFK. Take those 2 out for now. Put them where it's feasible, where it's doable. Why aren't those options even looked at? I mean, think about the K through 5, the kids that are in the system now. That should be the priority. You've said over and over pre-K is optional. And I was fortunate to be a stay-home mom. Most of us aren't in Milford, where they need that full-day daycare, full-day preschool. This is an option, it's a lottery. Parents, if you win that lottery and be able to use a pre-K for preschool, you don't know which school you're gonna get. Just because you live in JFK School District, you might have to go to Live Oaks or wherever that pre-K is. You're still gonna have to drive there. And being a pre-K mom, I was fine with driving. It didn't bother me. You'll drive to wherever it is to get that kid to that school. So being taken out of JFK and put into CAF Penn or somewhere else it should not be the issue. Think about the kids that are here now. Yeah, we have no problem with this, everything else, the 7 classrooms. Just really think about keeping stability. That's all I ask of you, and think about these kids first. Thank you.
Good evening, Beth Salai, 81 Cheryl Ann Drive. I had a whole thing written out, but a lot of it has been already mentioned. So I just want to emphasize to the board that thinking about what the plan was, what was the goal? The goal was parity. Everyone keeps mentioning parity, having things equal across the district. If we wait and do the shuffling again in a year or 2, it's going to be those children that will be moved around and those parents will be unhappy. So whenever we do it, someone is going to be unhappy. Unfortunately, it has to happen. At Orange Avenue, we've been dealing with an unevenness. We've been dealing with half of our school being a pre-K, and we've made the best of it. But is that fair to the children and the families at Orange Avenue? We don't think so. We would like to have the same opportunities as the other schools that are going to K-5. When you look at that chart and you see the 62%, that's really alarming. Why is that so low? Why are the other schools so high? If we have the space, we should be moving more of the population over to the east side. Obviously, all the research that's been done is saying that we need to do that shift. And if we have the space, I understand there's families that will be displaced. Again, Orange Avenue is losing families also. We would love to retain them. It just makes sense to keep preschool in as many buildings as possible. And if Orange Avenue ends up with a significant or majority amount of preschool, and all of the preschools are on the east end, that doesn't make sense for the west end of town. Like I said, my family went through the preschool at Orange Avenue. We loved it. It was a wonderful transition into kindergarten. But if those families have to be bused all the way to Orange Ave, CAF Penn, Live Oaks, all the way from a JFK or a Pumpkin area, that doesn't make sense. So thinking into the future, let's put it in place. Let's make it so that we don't have to be in the situation a year, 2 years, 3 years from now. We know what the right thing to do is, and that was already agreed upon in the fall. So I'm hoping that the board will stick by their decision and put preschool in as many schools as possible for the benefit of all the children. I could go on and on about how having so many preschool classrooms affects the K-5. If we had a significant amount of preschool and self-contained classrooms, we're limited as to what we can do. If there are 2 classrooms per grade level and there are personalities that need to be separated or other issues of that nature, we can't do that. Our hands are tied. So I just hope that the board thinks about what's best for the entire district and also thinking about long-term, what's going to happen is inevitable. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to address the board this evening?
Hi, Laura Scarna, 72 Lamplight Lane. Everything that I want to say has already been said, but I just want to reiterate that having 2 students who will be pulled out of Mathewson and moved away from their friends, you know, it's going to be hard, but again, kids are resilient, and that's fine. And again, what's best for the district, as long as it's good for the district. But I think with all of the turmoil, and just to reiterate that, looking at this from a business perspective, I have big concerns if one of the drivers was cost, which it should be, and that's right. Again, keeping in mind the children, but that we're going to be revisiting this in 3 to 4 years. And I just really ask that that's been taken into account and taken into consideration, because not only will we lose families, but our excellent teachers who have really held the kids together throughout all this turmoil. Thank you.
My name is Sarah Burns, and my address is 22 Peck Street, Milford, Connecticut. I would like to ask the board to consider option H, which keeps the Gunn Street Lamplight neighborhood at Mathewson School instead of Orange Ave. Right now, from the minutes from the last meeting, it states that there are no long-term space impacts by keeping those kids at Mathewson, and there are no educational impacts keeping them at Mathewson. So I'd like you to consider keeping those children at Mathewson instead of moving to Orange Avenue. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to address the board this evening?
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Cupson, and I live at 140 Platt Lane. And I would just like to urge the board this evening to stand behind the decision that they have made in terms of the redistricting program that would decentralize the preschools. We've been parents at Orange Avenue for the past 6 years, and I can say that it's been somewhat challenging. There have been some challenges with having all of the preschools at Orange Avenue. From both a logistical concern, I would say a logistical and safety concern. I think, and it hasn't, at least, unfortunately I was not at the meeting last time, but there are some concerns with the different dismissals, arrivals and dismissals, with some overlap in that, and there's concerns about safety in the parking lot. I've witnessed it firsthand. We would be walkers to Orange Ave. We're not able to take bus transportation. And there are times when the parking lot is quite busy, and we've got a lot of little kids moving back and forth, and you need to pay attention. So I have some serious concerns about that. And with regards to parity, to echo some of the comments from earlier, I am concerned about moving forward, the fact that with a larger pre-K population, that at Orange Avenue, for their K-5 population, may not have the opportunities going forward to have some of the rooms available for the additional programming that could be considered. So again, in terms of parity, I would like our children who go to Orange Ave, K-5, to have the same opportunities as the rest of the community. And I think it's important to have the pre-K available to folks in other parts of town too, instead of having to have everyone come to a central location. So I would urge the board to stand by their vote that they've already taken. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody? What?
Bless. Jonathan Sawitsky, 30 Judith Drive. Good evening. I think a lot of the conversations here have a thematic to them, which is, as an Orange Avenue parent right now, it's not the rejection of, say, all these preschool classes in the school. It's about everybody's desire here, whether they're in favor of not going to Orange Ave or preserving Orange Ave in some way, of maintaining sort of a richness of a continual experience throughout. So it seemed logical from our standpoint, as things were first set forth, to have that pre-K through 5th grade experience, as much continuity in one place as possible. Part of the concerns about having a smaller population at Orange Ave that is K through 5 is, does the school take on a personality that is weighted in one direction that then is maybe to the detriment of the rest of the kids there? So I have a son who's there now who will continue to be there as a result of this redistricting, which we're very pleased about. That continuity is very important to us. There's a lot that different grades can offer other grades, and having a larger school population adds to that richness in terms of the other students that are there, what they can offer each other. You know, we talk a lot about how students learn, they learn best from each other, and we think that part's very important. So you guys, when you first started here, talked about your mission and the idea of being proactive and not reactive. And I think it's important to kind of stay with that, because this feels like another one of those sort of last moment reactive kind of swings from where things originally were headed. There was a comfort in where things were going to be in terms of K through 5, decentralized pre-K. It made sense. I think we all felt comfortable with it because it felt like it was something that would work for the long term. I know parity is hard to achieve, equity is hard to achieve, school populations do what they are, you can't be a prognosticator and such, but it seemed like it had the most flexibility, the most scalability in terms of being able to accommodate what may come down the pike. So in that sense, it makes the most sense. I think something like shifting all those pre-Ks to one place is something that, like other decisions we've urged you guys in the past, it requires more study, more thought put in to see what the determination, what the impact might actually be. So, thank you for your time.
Is there anybody else who would like to address the board this evening? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment session. With board members, would anybody object to a 5-minute recess? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order, please. Thank you for your indulgence. I'd like the record to show Mrs. Griffin that we attempted to contact Dr. Goldworkin for a conference call, and her phone went right to voicemail, so she will be marked absent for the meeting. So I'm going to go back now to where I goofed before. Agenda item 3. We're going to move into the discussion, see if there's any clarifications from the board regarding any clarifications from board members. So, Mrs. Federico, if you could re-ask your question, and let's just start from the beginning.
Sure. So I wanted to ask the administration for clarification on the questions that have been raised about childcare, particularly the discrepancy in the cost of childcare between Pumpkin and JFK and Mathewson and Meadowside, potentially. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Federico, and members of the board. So I'll start again from the beginning. You've asked us to look at specifically those students who are currently at Pumpkin Delight School and John F. Kennedy School who are receiving transportation to the Boys and Girls Club in the afternoon. And so I started to get into some history. So let me pick up there. Prior to Simon Lake closing, Boys and Girls Club did not exist. After Simon Lake closed, Boys and Girls Club came into existence, and as you know, the Boys and Girls Club is in the Pumpkin Delight District. And so those students the first year, the only students that were going to Boys and Girls Club were, or only receiving transportation to Boys and Girls Club, were those students who would be on the bus anyway, going back to the Pumpkin Delight School District. But instead of dropping them at their regular bus stop, they received permission to be dropped at Boys and Girls Club. Similar to what we do now, if there's a daycare issue, we provide transportation to a licensed daycare provider so long as that licensed daycare provider is on the existing bus route. And Boys and Girls Club is, or at that time was, on the bus route for the Pumpkin Delight School going to that neighborhood. So those students received transportation, but they were on the bus anyway. And then questions came from other parents in the Pumpkin Delight District, can we get on that bus? And because there was available space on that bus, we allowed them to do that. So that was the first year. The second year, now because you have sister schools and you have students going to JFK who live in the Pumpkin Delight neighborhood, the question came up, can we can you provide us with transportation to Boys and Girls Club from JFK? Now, there's a JFK bus that goes to the Pumpkin Delight School neighborhood, just as the Pumpkin Delight School bus does. And so we allowed students from JFK who were not from that neighborhood, provided there was space on that bus, to ride the bus to Boys and Girls Club. So that was the second year. And that continued for 2 years. Now that brings us to last year, and there was such a call for transportation that we couldn't fit all of the students. There was a tremendous amount of students who, both from Pumpkin Delight and JFK, who wanted to go to the Boys and Girls Club, and they could not fit on the existing buses. There was a large first come, first serve waiting list. And so Boys and Girls Club approached Durham, and the first 2 years ago, Durham donated a second bus. Now, we have the original bus from Pumpkin that goes to that neighborhood, plus they provided a second bus to Boys and Girls Club at their cost. They donated it. And then again, this current school year, we requested that they also do that for the JFK students because there was such a a call from the parents. Now, as you've heard, the cost of Boys and Girls Club is $50 a year. But I think it's very important for the board to realize the distinction between before and after school child care and what the Boys and Girls Club is. Boys and Girls Club is a club. It's a drop-in center, as opposed to a licensed before and after care center, which the Milford Public Schools program is and the YMCA is. It's licensed by the state. And Boys and Girls Club has to meet certain requirements, but not those requirements for daycare. It's a club. And Boys and Girls Club philosophy throughout the United States is that it's an affordable club, and their existence depends upon fundraising, grants, and the like. It doesn't depend upon, obviously, it doesn't depend upon the user's fees because it's a dues. It's not a for-service fee. So I think it's important that you realize that no daycare facility or any daycare provider in the city of Milford can come close to the $50 per year. However, you've asked us to look at the current students who are being provided with that transportation to Boys and Girls Club, and we've done that. There are currently 60 students from Pumpkin Delight, and there are 40 students from JFK. And of those students, some of them will be going to Meadowside next year, or if 4C, this is all based upon the 4C plan that's been presented to you. If that were to pass, 15 of those approximately 100 students will be going to Meadowside. 4 of them will be going to Mathewson. And so we've talked to Durham, and they cannot at this time commit that they will continue to donate the bus because they go on a year-to-year basis and they need corporate approval. But they believe that they can, at this time they believe that they would be able to provide that support, and we would be able to, for the current students who are being provided with transportation to the Boys and Girls Club and their siblings, we would, for the next year, for 15-16 year, we would be able to transport those students from Meadowside, Mathewson, JFK, and Pumpkin. Existing current students who are being provided with transportation, we would be able to continue that, and we don't believe that it will cost the district any additional money. Okay? So I'll be happy to answer any questions along the way, but let me go to the Milford Public Schools daycare, sometimes referred to as the Patty Sabin program, because she's the director. Patty Sabin. Okay, I'm sorry. I misspoke. It's not a daycare program. It's a It's an after-school child care program that's being provided at the YMCA and Milford Public Schools. So let's talk about the Milford Public Schools program. It has its roots many years ago. We're not even sure how many years it goes back, but there was a grant-funded program at Simon Lake School only, that provided before and after child care. When Simon Lake closed, when the decision was made to close Simon Lake, the board at the time felt that it felt an obligation, a need to continue that type of program, and so the program that was run at Simon Lake School only was now going to be run at JFK and Pumpkin Delight, because that's where those Simon Lake students would be going to under the new reconfiguration plan. Previously, the YMCA provided the child care program, the before and after care program, at Pumpkin Delight and JFK. They provided it at all 8 schools Simon Lake had the Milford Public Schools program. And so with the new with the reconfiguration in 2010-11, Pumpkin Delight and JFK now had this program. And you heard some of the differences in cost between the YMCA program and this current program. We've been in discussions with the YMCA, and those discussions will continue. But what we can tell you tonight is that there are currently 84 students in the program at JFK, and there are 60 students in the program at Pumpkin Delight. That's total students. Some of them are just AM, some of them are just PM, and some of them are a combination of both. But there's, again, total 84 at JFK, 60 at Pumpkin Delight. Next year, if the 4C plan were to be put into effect, 23 of those students would be at Meadowside, and 4 of those students would be at Mathewson, and then 56 would remain at JFK and 37 at Pumpkin Delight. And so what we are prepared to do for the 15-16 school year is to provide transportation to those students who currently are in the Milford Public Schools program at JFK and Pumpkin Delight and will be now going outside of their current sister school program to Meadowside and Mathewson. So those 23 students at Meadowside, 4 at Mathewson, plus their siblings would be transported to the program, which would continue at JFK and Pumpkin Delight. That would be for the 15-16 school year. In the meantime, and continuing, we are, as I said, we are in discussions with the YMCA about their fee structures and how we might possibly, how they might be able to adjust fee schedules and work through scholarship programs and things like that to try and close that gap for all of the schools in Milford, not just the two, JFK and Pumpkin. And so I think I'll stop there at this point and answer any questions. And Dr. Fees or Mr. Cummings, if I've left anything out, please, please jump in. But that's our plan for this year, to address the need that you've identified for the students who are currently at Pumpkin Delight and JFK going to Boys and Girls Club and who are in the Milford Public Schools program.
Thank you, Mr. Riccitelli. So just to remind the board members as well, I believe that we have all agreed that we feel that this is something that we should plan like a COW meeting on to look at going forward. But what I'm hearing administration say is this would be a solution for the coming year, to give us some time to look a little bit more in depth into that. So are there any questions for Mr. Riccitelli? Mrs. Federico?
Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Riccitelli. One question that comes to mind is the transportation. Is that in both options? It's without additional cost to the district?
We believe that we'll be able to do it. Everything is going to depend on once the lines are drawn and we see how many students we're going to have on the buses. We believe that we will be able to absorb the Mathewson and Meadowside students going to the Milford Public Schools program on our existing runs. If we can't, the greatest exposure that we will have is one tier, which amounts to about $12,000 to $15,000. And if that were the case, we would work with the board to identify in the budget where we might be able to not pay for something in order to pay for this. But it's our belief at this time that we'll be able to absorb those costs, absorb those students on existing bus runs.
Thank you.
Other questions from board members on this issue? No? Okay, other clarifications that board members would like to ask? Mr. DeRosa?
Yes, through you to the administration. Basically, in my absence last week, I was out of the room for 10 minutes or so. some discussions were had and some consensus discussion was had. And, you know, going home in the evening and first of all, making a statement before that, there was a lot of information presented last week. And looking at the options that were quote-unquote removed from the packet that we had decided as a board that we would not entertain, I'd like to know if we could consider asking the administration to look at one of those options that we took off the table with some minor modifications. And basically what I'd like you to do, if we could agree upon it, in addition to 4C, would be to incorporate the removed option of 4I into a new option of 4J, but move the students on Gunn Street and Lamplight to Orange Avenue and not Mathewson, which I know is already covered under 4C. Also talk about leaving one special ed and self-contained classrooms in Mathewson and leaving it to the discretion of the administration as to where to place the 2 pre-Ks from JFK and 2 special eds with self-contained Mathewson schools to other less burdened schools such as Calf Penn and Orchard Hills. This will allow for the pre-K. This will allow for pre-K, excuse me, at 3 schools within the district, as agreed upon by the board last year, referring to the decision made on October 13th, which basically states that we had agreed to a minimum of 3 schools that we would move pre-K to out of Orange Avenue. And I'm asking you for consideration of this mainly because we didn't look at 3 schools as housing pre-K. We always talked about 4. And again, you know, my understanding is that if we just choose 3 and maybe shuffle around a little bit more, we could entertain in saving some disruption for some of the parents in North Milford and other parts of, such as Beaverbrook or Caswell Cove. So that is my further clarification, and I'm going to ask if we could have some discussion on that or what your original opinions might be on that. That's it.
Are you asking for board members to discuss this? Is that your?
Well, I'm first of all asking the administration is that, and I know we had a discussion that you would take the direction of the board from that aspect. So, yeah, I am asking the board if we can have discussion on this and see where we go from here.
So from my perspective, personally, I think this goes beyond where special ed and where preschool are placed. I think, for one thing, it's been identified from by the data that putting the Beaverbrook and the Caswell Cove area back into JFK, there will be no preschool availability at JFK for at least 5 years. Those 2 rooms are gone for at least that length of time. The data shows that. We will probably never see any additional program rooms at JFK for that purpose. The data shows that as well, because if we don't even have room for 2 pre-Ks for 5 more years, it'll be well beyond that before we could have any realization of 1 or even 2 of the additional program rooms that we've been talking about. So there we place that school, again, in a position where they have to choose to do without something that all the other schools will have. I also believe it would be disruptive to the grandfathering option for the Milford Point Road corridor and Meadowside School going to Calf Penn Meadow students, because the Milford Point Road corridor grandfathering option was predicated on the fact that we would have to delay for 1 year the placement of those 2 preschool classes in JFK to allow the students that were to be grandfathered to stay in their pairing next year. That was made very clear in the data as well. And that also then I'm thinking may disrupt the, if they're all having to stay at Meadowside with no grandfathering option, it would disrupt the kids at the 5th graders that would be at Meadowside that are being redistricted out to Calf Penn Meadow. That kind of eliminates the option for them as well. But beyond that, you know, nobody's talking about Milford Point Road corridor and the area south of the the Green and Fort Trumbull, which are, that happens to be my district. Those students are all getting displaced. We've got the Milford Port Road corridor includes children that would have, families that would have been Simon Lake families that have totally lost their school and have no place else to go, no other option. You know, I go back and I support the plans that we put into place last fall. To me, the most important piece is the balancing of the school enrollment with longevity. Putting students back with the 4I proposal, even without the Lamplight Lane, Gun Street, it puts enrollment of Mathewson and JFK higher than their counterparts. And where we have Mathewson with a school that is the same size as Orange Ave, I believe you'll end up with a good 200 student difference between the two schools. So those would be some of my concerns with that proposal. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add.
If I can comment on that. I'm just, again, what's driving this was the 4I option, and if I'm going back to the notes, specifically to page 41, and looking at the chart, looking at the percentages in implementing 4I as an option, assuming that 4I was accepted, and it's only an assumption that's accepted, because that's the way I'm reading these charts, that at the end of the proposal and beginning of the school year, that CAF Penn going into the school year, we have 72% capacity. And we have 62% capacity at Orange Avenue, and we have 86% at Orchard Hills. All the other schools are at least 92 or greater. So again, if we're talking about parity, then we're still talking about Orange Avenue having 62%, and there's room there. We're also talking about CAF Penn, which at 72% still has room there. And we can even talk about Orchard Hills having room there. So I'm not talking about, I'm talking about bringing it closer to the average number of 86 or even 88% or above, and maybe moving a classroom out of Mathewson and moving it to CAF Penn where they show they have capacity, to me makes sense. So right now JFK, you mentioned, has 95%, Orange Avenue has 62. I think that's what you'd said. So I don't know where the parity equals there.
Well, we're talking about K-5 enrollment for those pieces, not right. Preschool does not play into that. So we're talking K-5 enrollment. Just to clarify what I meant. Okay. I think Mylona McBroom was pretty clear that the challenges that they faced with the positions of the school, the locations of the school to one another, that's what really posed the challenges in terms of further distributing the population. I personally would have liked to have seen us been able to stretch the population out a little bit further to the east, but I've come to realize that it's just not possible because of the locations of the schools to one another. They're too close together, and when you start, as you start spreading out further, you end up with the possibility of putting a school right out of its own district.
I don't understand. Can you clarify that a little bit? Especially the part about
as Mylona McBroom, if you recall the page where they had all the circles showing how the schools are so that'd be page 9. This is what is preventing further. It's my recollection. Mr. Riccitelli, you might be able to help with this. I think you might have a handle on this as well, but this is my understanding of why it's been so hard for them to spread out the enrollment even further and where the challenges laid as to where the students could go. Because some of the schools are so close to one another. For instance, let's take Pumpkin Delight School, which is within a mile of Meadowside. If you shifted any further, Pumpkin Delight is full to the gills, and if you shifted any more students, you're going to shift them from the topmost part to the east. You end up putting them in Meadowside School, and Pumpkin Delight no longer sits within its own district because you're sending kids that live there to Meadowside. That's been one of the biggest challenges with this. And It's this, I mean, it's similar with Orange Ave and Calf Pen are close together. Oh, I'm sorry, Orchard Hills and Calf Pen. But as you know, continuing to shift to the east, you have the potential of putting a school right out of its district, which is why they couldn't take any more kids out of Pumpkin Delight and put them and move them, because without severely breaking up a neighborhood or, you know, splitting a neighborhood in half or something of that nature. So for me, I'm looking at the overall enrollment as well as everything else. And I think it's as a board, we need to be looking, you know, from 10,000 feet down and really taking into consideration what it is that will address, you know, the goals that we put in place long term. Ms. Federico?
Just if we're looking at the average class size and utilization, on page 21 in the Minuteman Drive option, we have utilization where Calf Pen goes up to 94% utilization. Orange Avenue in that case is at 90%, and most of the other schools hover around 90 or 100, with Orchard Hills being the lowest at 76. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to get perfect, but I think that is a pretty good spread of the utilization and pretty comparable.
But I think also inherent in this question, and maybe we need to ask Dr. Fieser to address the issue of the placement of the choices that they made to put certain preschool classes together, certain special self-contained classes together. Again, so we're just kind of throwing out there, well, why don't you just leave one of them there and move two of them somewhere else, speaking in terms of the special ed contained classrooms that were slated to be at Mathewson. So what would be the ramifications of doing that?
So Mrs. Glennon, if it's all right with you, Mrs. Kelleher could not be here this evening, but I've asked Christine Kennedy, who's our supervisor for elementary special education, to be present, and I think she could answer that question far better than I.
Does any board member object to Mrs. Kennedy speaking with us? No. Thank you.
Hi. When we look at placing the preschool classes, we don't ever want to have one on its own because we often look to share students. Some students need to go extended time, and we like to have the opportunity to have some classes have 3-year-olds in the morning, some have 3-year-olds in the afternoon, and the 4-year-olds are reversed so that we can share the students. The students that go into primary development, which is our special ed kindergarten class, we like to have the pre-K with them so that they have the continuity of the same building and the same support staff. So at Mathewson and at Meadowside, whichever school ends up receiving those programs, we would like to have the continuity of the pre-K and the kindergarten, in the special ed kindergarten, in the same building so that the students aren't switching schools again, because most likely they'll go to a different school for their K-5 enrollment.
Was that saying that all 3 of the classes that are currently proposed to be at Mathewson School, your preference would be for those 3 to be together?
Yes.
Did I hear you say 3?
Yes,
3?
2 pre-K and 1 special ed kindergarten. And on the other end, when you mentioned the other programs being together, for the students, for instance, that are in the autism program, we look to have we're hoping to have the pre-K autism program with an integrated autism program together so that we can have those children be in an integrated setting when they're able to, and then have the K-5 autism classes in that same building, because those children do have more difficulty transitioning to different staff and to different locations and different expectations, and also for them to be able to have peers that they can go through the elementary schools with so that they can have that connection when they're in the integrated setting.
So the integrated autistic class, so that is considered a standalone self-contained classroom or not?
The preschool?
Well, did I just hear you mention 3 other programs, pre-K autism, integrated autism class, and a K-5 autism?
The integrated is not an autism class, but the students that have autism go into that integrated class for their generalization.
So it's two room. You're talking 2 special ed programs.
Correct.
Pre-K autism and a K-5 autism class should be in the same building.
Yeah, actually, we have 2 K-5 autism classes.
Okay. Mrs. Federico?
Through you to Ms. Kennedy, I think there's a little confusion on this, and maybe you can help us clarify it. We've looked at the placement of pre-K rooms and special ed self-contained rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, there's only one school that's slated to have both, and that's Orange Avenue. So I think maybe there's some other rooms that maybe we're missing in this discussion that may be just getting us confused. So when you say the pre-K children will move on in the same building, are they moving to self-contained special ed rooms, or are they moving to just regular kindergarten?
It's hard to predict, but
okay.
There will be some children in the pre-K classes that will go on to a self-contained kindergarten, which is called primary development, and there are going to be some children that are in the pre-K autism that will go into the grade level autism program, which would be the K through 5.
Oh, I'm sorry, may I ask? Okay, so if the pre-K rooms and the special ed self-contained rooms are not in the same building, then how does that happen, that they would move in the same building? I don't know if I'm being
If they're not in the
clear.
same building, then the children would have to change schools.
Okay.
You done?
So maybe that's a question back to administration, if they could clarify that? Because we're not looking at a plan other than Orange Avenue where they're in the same building. Am I missing something?
Could I ask one clarifying question?
I think there's a little bit of confusion here. Mrs. Kennedy, would you want to talk about the pre-K program, which includes 10 classrooms, and then the self-contained program in the district, of which there is a pre-K self-contained classroom as well, and make the distinction, because I think there are some people that think that most of the pre-K are not special education students, when that is not true. Most of the pre-K is comprised of special education students, or students who are very needy with respect to special needs, and that the school system is attempting to address.
So we have 8 preschool classes that are integrated, that are preschool special ed classes. One of them is self-contained, and that has the children with autism. So that leaves 7 classes that are integrated special ed pre-K classes. The majority of those children in those 7 classes will move on to regular kindergarten, some with support. Some will go on to the primary development, which is a special ed kindergarten class. And then the children that are in that self-contained pre-K autism class will most likely go on to stay in an autism program. The integrated classes typically have 1/3 of the students that are identified with IEPs, so they have special education needs. And about 1/3 of them also are children that we took in because they are considered at risk. They scored low on the screening that we do, or they were referred from a community program, or their pediatrician, or there were behavior concerns. So those are students that we're monitoring. Many of those students go through the evaluation process while they're in preschool, and some of them do get identified as having a special education need.
So just to clarify, not every student in the special education pre-K program goes on to a self-contained pre-K, self-contained classroom.
Right, a small percentage of them go on.
Did I hear you say most of them go into regular kindergarten?
Correct.
And am I correct that at age 3, you're made aware that there are students that are in need of special needs services, and we're responsible at that point for providing them with their services?
If they're already receiving services through birth to 3, we get notified at 2 years, 6 months, and we're obligated to start the transition process and have a PPT planning for them, so that by their 3rd birthday we have a program in place for them. And then any student that is presented as a student of concern from age 3 on, we do a screening and an evaluation to determine if they have special education needs. But we are obligated under Child Find to reach out to any student that might be of concern as of their 3rd birthday.
Did you have a question, Mr. DeRosa, before, or was it answered?
This is a comment through you to Ms. Kennedy. You mentioned I heard the number 3 pre-Kers at Mathewson. Is that? I don't know if I was hearing things or.
One of them is a special ed kindergarten class.
So I think here might be where some of the confusion is. We have pre-K we have the 10 pre-K classrooms that right now are all at Orange Ave. And then we have K through 5 self-contained classrooms, and then we also have some pre-K self-contained classroom?
One pre-K self-contained, yes.
So I think at Mathewson, she was saying will be 2 special ed pre-K classrooms and 1 special ed kindergarten classroom, and those are all considered self-contained classrooms, correct?
Just the kindergarten would be self-contained.
Just the kindergarten?
The pre-K would be integrated.
To both of them?
Yes.
Okay, so that's different than what we have on our charts. Because on our charts, we're showing 3 self-contained special ed classes. And no pre-K at all, right?
I think that I might have jumped because I think that was what we had talked about if we weren't able to have the pre-K at JFK, and we still wanted it at that side of
Mm-hmm.
town, and since we had 3 classes slated for that building in order to keep the pre-K on that. So that was something that we had talked about,
Okay.
I think, on our own if we had to make a move.
All right. So I'm just going to go back to fundamentally again. The purpose of this, the purpose was to shift enrollment from west to east. In order to balance enrollment, in order to leave flexibility in the classrooms, in order to flexibility in the schools. I mean, the whole host of reasons that we have discussed at length. And again, I feel the board is getting into some real slippery slope territory in trying to dictate where administration should place the pre-K and the special needs classrooms. And that's really what we are doing with this discussion, is we're kind of tying their hands and saying you need to find a different option. These are students, I mean, we're mandated to provide these services, we're mandated to provide the services in a certain way. They need to be able to carry out the services according to the students' needs. And we have never, ever, ever, this as a board, I've never seen a Board of Education get into the details of the educational programming. This is what we have the superintendent for. She's our educational leader, she's the expert. And I have real concerns about this discussion, period.
Madam Chair, a question. Yeah, if we were to, as part of this discussion, leave to the administration the ability to, if we come up with the generalization as to what we need to do with this proposed 4J as a generalization, and allow the details to be worked out with the administration as far as what happens with the special ed and with the pre-K, would that be satisfactory? Because that way we're not getting into the minutia. We're giving a general, a broad brush to solve a problem, and leave them the details as to how the picture actually comes out.
But we are tying their hands without shifting the students from the west to the east, without shifting students out of JFK School and Mathewson School, and shifting students out of Meadowside as well. We are tying their hands as to where they can put those programs. And we are not balancing the enrollment as we set out to do.
Mrs. Glennon? Yes. If I could perhaps, if I understand what Mr. Droza was talking about, a 4J would include 4I, am I correct in that? I think that there's some...
Yeah, the only thing is Lamplight and Gun Street would go to Orange Avenue, not Mathewson.
I think that there's some confusion that came out of the last meeting, and some of the things that I've heard some of the board members say, that 4I is feasible. And Mr. Zuba said that, but what he didn't continue on, because it seemed to be self-evident, is that 4I is only feasible if you take the 2 pre-K classes out of JFK, and if you take the 3 self-contained classrooms out of Mathewson. And further, you can't do the grandfathering because those students, the JFK proposal for the grandfathering from District 1 presupposes that there will be space at JFK and you will no longer have space under 4I. So it's feasible, as all of the tweaks, as they called them, all of them were feasible, but they come with the downside or the consequences of that proposal. And so 4I is only feasible with those three things that I think the board said when they took 4F, G off the table. I think 4E, F, and G off the table. 4I further exacerbates those problems. It only compounds them. And so 4I is only feasible if everything that you took off the table in E, F, and G were possible.
Going back, part of my discussion or interest was to look at having pre-K at 3 schools and not 4. And again, that wasn't an option that was reviewed by the consultant at all. So, you know, again, it's not just, you know, what Ms. Russelli said, but it's also the change of 3 schools having pre-K and not 4. Because that's what, as a board, we agreed minimally that we would have them placed in.
We did agree that, but I do remember, Mr. DeRosa, going back to when February 11th, when my Lona McBroom, after they had finished their presentation, which laid this all out, you thanked them for putting it in 4 schools and said that you did. You thanked them for putting it in 4 schools. This was important to you. So that's how we got to the 4 schools. I mean, we never actually, I think as a board, we did say minimally 3 schools. And believe, I mean, I appreciate the effort to try to find compromise. But again, you know, we still had a plan in place that we all agreed we would follow. And you know, I'm just going to say it again that I have a level of discomfort with this conversation about making decisions that tie the hands of administration as to how they can carry out the preschool and the special ed program. And again, you know, we have a whole another host of children. You know, 100 and how many? It's 100, at least 150 kids between Milford Point Road corridor and those going to the south of the Green and the Fort Trumbull area that are still being impacted. You know, the goal was to shift the enrollment to make room in all the schools, to make use of the room that we have in the schools on the east, and to ease up the overcrowding that we have in the west. And this is what 4C accomplishes. You know, I feel that it accomplishes everything that we set out to do in the items that we adopted last fall. Yes, Mrs. Federico.
Through you to the board, regarding Mr. Baselli's comment about leaving it to administration to determine where the pre-K and the special education rooms need to be, my feeling is that we already left it to administration and we asked them to indicate where the pre-K and the special education rooms need to be, and that's what Malona McBroom started with. That's what they worked with. So I, like Ms. Glennon, I'm uncomfortable with overriding that because they took many factors into account when they determined where those rooms need to be. And, you know, as a board, we're sitting here discussing this reason or that reason, and they could all be valid reasons, but at the end of the day, you know, we put it in the hands of the folks over there. I really believe they and Ms. Kennedy and Mrs. Kelleher are in the best position to determine where those rooms should be, and I believe that they've already told us.
And if I may just respond to that, it's that my comment was in reference to 4J because no one has ever seen that before, and that's the reason why I suggested that. I understand that the administration has worked hard, and they have given the information for that, but they did not, with reference to this proposal, look at that, and that's where my comment was in reference to that.
But really, 4J is really simply 4I without Gun Street. So we have already looked at that because we had each individual piece separately. We had we started with 4C and we took off the table. We said we were going to take off the table for F, G, and H. So 4F is Beaverbrook, 4G is North Milford. Really what you're proposing is that we do 4C, adding back in 4F and 4G. That's what your proposal is in my viewpoint. It's 4I without Gun Street and Lamplight Lane, so you could conversely say it's 4C with 4F and 4G added back in. So we have actually already had all this discussion because as we discussed last week, those two options have consequences. They have a downside. They displace special ed. They displace the pre-K program, and they have far-reaching rippling effects. Not good effects, bad effects. Mr. DeGrego.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the board. Talk about tying their hands, and nobody wants to tie anybody's hands. I've heard since the summer, every student, all student, every student, all student. And I feel, as we were working towards a goal, we tied the hands of Malone and McBroom. And every time they came around, it was always a gimme that North Milford would go to Orange Ave. And a few other things on there. I feel it wasn't fair. And this board member is going to quote his favorite president, Franklin Roosevelt. I think there should be a new deal. Thank you.
The only other comment I want to make, Ms. Glennon, reference to you was that also the 4J option includes 3 schools for pre-K, not 4. So it is a little bit different. And again, going back with what we agreed to upon as a board, and again, I'm just asking that if there's any consideration, the administration would consider that and how it affects the numbers. I know we all have our understandings or beliefs or interpretations, but again, if there's any reason the board, the administration would come back and say, listen, flat out, it's not going to work, then we move on. But again, all the charts that I've seen that have been presented to us by the consultants have always shown 4 schools, not 3. And again, if I'm going to build something for long term, I'm going to start with the least amount of resources and work my way up to get, to make sure everything is balanced as I go forward. And sooner or later, you're gonna hit a point of diminishing returns, and that's when you back off. So again, that's why I've made other comments where, instead of starting here, we start in the middle. So again, I'm asking, because this changes for 3 schools instead of 4, so it is different in that aspect. And if we're not going to talk about it anymore, then we move on.
Other board members have any thing that they'd like to add to this discussion? Yes, Ms. Federico.
Madam Chair, through you to the board, I guess we'd have to ask the question then, which 3 schools? And that would mean going back to administration and having them redetermine which schools are and how many rooms in each school. It doesn't sound to me like this is an optimal solution. We talked about decentralization of pre-K, and to me that's geographical. That's not just breaking it out of one school. So I don't see a way this could be done geographically. I don't know if that's what you're looking for administration to answer.
No, what I'm saying is, right now everything's at Orange Avenue. And how long has pre-K been in Orange Avenue? Please, someone tell me. 5 years. So the entire district, if they wanted pre-K, would have to go from wherever they are to Orange Avenue. And again, we're trying to take 5 criteria and meet everyone on an equal basis. And if I'm just going back to the packet here, and I look at page 8 and 9, it speaks about, page 8, it speaks about the 5 criteria. And then the challenges show that the first one and only one listed, the only challenge that was presented, or at least that was included in this, and I can't find the other ones, is adhere to natural boundaries and keep neighborhoods together to the greatest extent feasible. But I don't see anywhere else where they've shown the challenge of balancing enrollments, or they've shown the challenge of minimizing student travel time, or shown the challenges of mitigating impact, or shown the challenges of avoid unequal distribution of redistricting and burning. I've only seen one challenge that they put down on the piece of paper. So again, I don't think, and that's why I asked the question last week.
Challenges go all the way through. I don't mean to interrupt you, but page 11, they have criteria challenges on 3 pages of criteria challenges. 9, 10, 11.
Okay, so I stand corrected on that. So, to go back to my point, right now everything is on Orange Avenue. We can't please everybody. Again, I'm just asking for the administrator to consider this as an option to work the numbers. To me, if we make a decision tonight or next week, to me it's not going to, hurt the system to wait another week. But if everybody here feels that we're not going to do that, we're forced to make a decision tonight, then I'm going to vote accordingly. But again, to wait a week to see if this option could be feasible. No, that's not what I asked. That's not what I asked.
Okay.
So again, that's what I'm asking. So if we're not going to do that, then we're going to move on.
Well, again, for me personally, it goes beyond the issue of the pre-K. There's other, we had, there's 3 other pieces of the plan that we adopted that need to play into this too. The pre-K piece is not the only piece of it. So,
Can we ask administration?
No, the board has not asked administration. So I guess, the question that Mr. DeRosa seems to be asking is, board members, do we have consensus to ask administration to look at this, or do we move on? So if we could go down well, I'll ask Mrs. Griffin to do it's just a consensus, informal, but I'll ask her to use the roll call.
Move on.
Yes.
No, I would not.
No.
No.
Thank you. I thank you for the opportunity. I really do.
Are there any other clarifying pieces that board members would like to raise to administration before we move on? Mr. Whiskeyman?
We've had some previous discussions about grandfathering. I'd just like to know where we stand in the plans to support that effort.
We can speak to the grandfathering. Again, Mr. Ricitelli can speak to the specifics because part of this involves transportation. So I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Dr. Fieser. As was reported to the board at your workshop on February 23rd, grandfathering is possible for those students who are currently being placed outside of their current pairing. In other words, they're going outside of their current two sister schools. And as we reported to you, the numbers from District 1, which is currently, as you know, Pumpkin Delight and JFK, there are 29 students who are going outside of that pairing. 10 would go to Mathewson, yes, 10, under the 4C plan, 10 would go to Mathewson, 19 would go to Meadowside. It is possible to grandfather those current fourth graders who would be fifth graders at Meadowside School, which is where the fifth grade, their current fourth grade class is going to go. So yes, that is possible, but what that requires is the delay for 1 year of the, let me back up here. Right, what that does is it delays for 1 year the move to preschool at Kennedy, at JFK, for 1 year.
Can I clarify that, Mr.
Yep.
Riccitelli?
Yep.
You're speaking of the District 2 now or District 1? Because I heard you mention Meadowside. So my understanding was that in District 1, the JFK Pumpkin Delight students would be grandfathered into JFK, which would delay the pre-K going into JFK for 1 year.
I apologize. It's too. I apologize. There's 29 students altogether. They would be grandfathered at JFK because there's no room at Pumpkin Delight to do that. And so yes, all 29 of those students can be grandfathered. There is space for them at JFK. However, it would mean putting off the preschool at JFK for just 1 year until those grandfathered students are out of the school, and then the pre-K would be brought into JFK as planned. I apologize for the confusion. The District 2, which is currently Mathewson and Meadowside, those students, there are 34 students. 27 would, under the 4C plan, would go to Orange Avenue, and 7 of them would go to Calf Penn. Those 34 students can be accommodated at Meadowside. And under 4C, if you didn't make the adjustment, which is known as 4D, to the Minuteman area, there are currently 5 students under option 4C that would be going outside of their current sister school pairing, and they would be going to Orchard Hills. They can be accommodated easily at Calf Penn. They could be grandfathered into Calf Penn. And so it is all possible. We also would, as I reported to you on that, on the 23rd, we would transport normally out-of-district students are not transported, but because this is obviously an accommodation that is being made for those fourth grade students going into fifth grade just for 1 year, we would provide transportation at a maximum cost of $12,000 to $15,000.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Riccitelli on that? Ms. DeBias?
Can you just clarify one more time? The Orchard Hills, Calf Penn kids with the Minuteman Drive move, that all fit?
Yeah, when we looked at the numbers at the February 23rd meeting, when we ran actually when Mylone and McBroom ran the numbers, we were working off option 4C. I know since then the board has talked about 4D, which puts the Minuteman Drive area back into Calf Penn. But if the board did not exercise 4D and stayed with 4C, there would be 5 students who are currently in Calf Penn that would be slated to go to Orchard Hills, but we could grandfather those students at CAF Penn without any problems. If you make the change in 4D and put Minuteman back into CAF Penn, this is moot.
Any other questions regarding the grandfathering? Okay, seeing none, any other clarifying points that need to be made? Mrs. Federico has asked for a quick recess.
Maybe just take a quick recess if we're done with this phase.
5 minutes, Mrs.
5
Federico.
minutes. Okay.
Make a motion that the Board of Education move to direct administration to carry out redistricting Plan 4C as developed by Malone and McBroom and presented to the Milford Board of Education on February 11th of 2015, the modification of Plan 4D, the Minuteman Drive piece.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Federico has seconded the motion. Is there discussion on the motion?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Sadi.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen that are here today, I want to let you know that it's been a very difficult time to come to this decision. First and foremost, often you feel that you've not been heard. You've all been heard. We may not all agree with what you've had to say, but you've been impassioned for the children of this particular community, which is important. The decision the board has to make, as we recognize, and most of the speakers have recognized, is very difficult. The purpose of this particular plan is to make sure that it helps all of the children to have equality for diversity, to have equality with programs, and to have all of the buildings that belong to every citizen that has a child in a school district, not just a school, but all school buildings available for them. I think it's a fair assessment of what's going on. It's not going to keep everybody happy. We understand this. We have to be proactive. We have to be long-range thinking. I think this is important. This plan will put that into place. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sadi. Other discussion? Ms. Federico?
Madam Chair, through you to the board, I believe this is the plan that best supports our previous action to equitably balance enrollment. In my opinion, this is the plan with the best long-term outlook and allows us to have the flexibility for future growth and expansion of programming. And this is the plan that makes it least likely that a future board will have to come back and look at redistricting in the near future.
Thank you, Mrs. Federico. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Roll call, please.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Robert Sadi?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. 6-3, the motion passes. I'll entertain a motion. Next motion, please. Mr. Sadi.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Make a motion that the Board of Education move to direct administration to carry out a grandfathering plan for the current 4th grade students who are redistricted outside of their current pairing of schools.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bias has seconded the motion. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Roll call, please.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Robert Sadi?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes 6-3. Motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Mr. DeRosa seconds. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned.